Henry's life on the ranch had always been quiet, almost painfully so. The Montana plains stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of golden grass under a sky so wide that it seemed almost unreal. Most days, the only sound he heard was the wind whispering through the tall stalks of wheat and the distant lowing of his cattle. Henry had chosen this life years ago, thinking that solitude would bring him peace. But after so many years alone, it often brought him a strange, gnawing emptiness. He had grown used to the rhythms of the land, the early mornings when the sun first kissed the horizon, the hot afternoons when the air shimmered above the fields, and the quiet nights when the stars seemed close enough to touch. The ranch, inherited from his father, had been his home and his responsibility. Each fence line, each barn, each patch of soil felt like a part of him. Yet, despite his love for the land, Henry couldn't shake the sense that life had something unexpected waiting just beyond the familiar hills. It was on a late summer evening, the kind where the air is warm and heavy and the sky is painted in oranges and purples, that Henry's life began to feel different. He had been finishing chores for the day, checking fences and making sure the cattle had water. The sun was slowly slipping below the horizon, and the long shadows of the barns stretched across the fields like dark fingers. That's when he saw her, a woman walking along the dirt road that ran beside his property. She was tall, taller than anyone he had ever seen, and moved with a quiet grace, as though the wind itself carried her. She wore a flowing white dress that shimmered faintly in the fading light. There was something about her that made Henry stop in his tracks, something almost otherworldly. For a moment, he wondered if he was imagining it, if the isolation of the ranch had finally made him see things that weren't there. But she was real. She approached slowly, her eyes meeting his with a calm yet serious gaze that sent a strange shiver down his spine. "Hello," she said softly, her voice carrying across the still air. Henry's first instinct was to be cautious. Visitors were rare in this part of the world. People usually passed by, traveling from town to town. But it had been years since anyone had stopped at his gate. And yet, there was something compelling about her presence. Her voice was gentle, almost musical, and there was a strange warmth in her expression, a kind of honesty that made it hard to say no. "Sure," Henry said finally, his voice hoarse from surprise. "You can stay for a bit. The ranch isn't much, but it's safe." The woman smiled, and Henry noticed the faint sparkle in her eyes, like sunlight on water. "Thank you. I don't have much time. I'm traveling to a wedding, and I was told this road was the only safe path through the area." Henry nodded, leading her toward the small cabin that served as his home. The inside was modest, with wooden floors worn smooth from years of footsteps, and shelves lined with jars of preserves and stacks of books. He offered her some water, and she accepted, sitting quietly at the old wooden table while Henry went to tend the fire. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her tone serious now. "I must warn you about something on your land. Something dangerous." Henry paused mid-step, curious despite himself. "Dangerous? What do you mean?" She pointed toward the far corner of his property, where a small, oddly shaped mound jutted slightly above the grass. Don't touch it," she said, her voice low and urgent. "No matter what, don't touch it. It is not what it seems." Henry frowned. The mound was peculiar, certainly, but it had always been there, a small rise in the otherwise flat land. He had assumed it was a leftover from some old fence post or a forgotten root cellar. I see it," he said slowly. "But it's just a small mound. Is it really dangerous?" Her eyes met his again, and there was a seriousness there that made him swallow hard. "Yes, very. Some things are better left alone, even if they seem harmless. I only warn you because I care. Please, don't touch it." Henry nodded, though he couldn't help feeling a flicker of skepticism. He had spent his entire life working the land, fixing fences, clearing brush, and caring for the cattle. He had seen snakes, storms, and all sorts of unexpected events, and he had survived them all. A mound of dirt, however strange it looked, did not seem like something that could harm him. Yet, even as he tried to dismiss her warning, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. There was an odd tension in the air, a sense of anticipation, as if the land itself was holding its breath. He noticed how she kept glancing toward the mound, her hands lightly gripping the edges of her dress. Every so often, she would glance at him, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. The rest of the evening passed in quiet conversation. She told him about her journey, the wedding she was heading to, and the small towns she had passed through. She spoke of flowers, laughter, and distant relatives, painting pictures of a life Henry could barely imagine. He, in turn, spoke about the ranch, the hardships of living alone, and the rhythm of a life shaped by land and labor. By the time the sun had disappeared completely, leaving a canopy of stars overhead, Henry felt an unusual connection with the stranger. She was a mystery, certainly, but there was a sincerity in her presence that made him want to trust her. And yet, her warning lingered in his mind, like a shadow he couldn't shake. When the night grew deeper, she retired to a small room in the cabin, leaving Henry alone by the fire. He stared into the flickering flames, thinking about the mound, about her warning, and about the strange feeling that had settled over the ranch since her arrival. It was a mixture of curiosity and unease, a tugging at the edges of his mind that he could not ignore. By the time he finally went to bed, Henry was restless. He lay awake, listening to the wind in the grass, imagining what might lie beneath the mound. The woman's warning echoed in his mind. Don't, just don't, touch it. He repeated it silently to himself, over and over, as if saying the words aloud might somehow protect him or prepare him for what was to come. Though he tried to dismiss it, sleep was elusive. He kept imagining the mound shifting, strange shadows dancing beneath the grass, and the woman's tall, ethereal figure watching him with quiet intensity. Henry realized, for the first time in years, that the ranch, and perhaps his entire life, was about to change in ways he could not predict. And deep down, despite his attempts to resist it, a small, persistent curiosity began to grow. The next morning, the ranch looked exactly as it always had, bathed in golden sunlight that spilled across the fields. The wind was softer than the night before, rustling the tall grass gently. Henry had woken early, as was his habit, but sleep had been shallow. His mind kept returning to the strange woman and her warning, "Don't, just don't touch it." The words were still echoing in his head, like a whisper that refused to be ignored. Henry started his day with his usual routine. He checked on the cattle, filled their troughs with fresh water, and repaired a section of fence that had sagged overnight. Each task was familiar and comforting, a reminder of the simple order of life. Yet, no matter how hard he focused on the chores, his eyes kept drifting to the mound near the edge of the property. He tried to convince himself it was just a strange hill, nothing more. He reminded himself that he had lived on this land for decades and had never seen anything dangerous there. But curiosity, as Henry realized, has a way of growing quietly, like a small seed taking root. As he moved through the fields, he found himself thinking about the mound more and more. He wondered why the woman had come all this way just to warn him. Why had she chosen him, a lonely rancher, to share such a cryptic message? And most importantly, what could be buried beneath that patch of earth that was so important she felt the need to caution him? Throughout the morning, the woman remained quiet. She helped him with chores when she could, fetching water and assisting with small tasks. But she spoke little of the mound. Every so often, she would glance toward it, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if measuring some invisible line she dared not cross. Henry noticed it, and felt a strange mixture of respect and frustration. He wanted to ask her more questions, to learn why the mound mattered so much, but every time he tried, she would shake her head or change the subject. By midday, the sun was high in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the fields. Henry took a break under the shade of a large oak tree near the barn, wiping sweat from his brow. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional chirping of birds and the distant lowing of cattle. The woman sat nearby, her white dress shimmering faintly in the sunlight. She seemed almost otherworldly in the warm light, and Henry could not help but be captivated by her presence. "You're very careful," she said suddenly, as though reading his thoughts. "That's good. But there are some things that even careful hands can disturb." Henry looked at her, curious. "You mean the mound?" She nodded, her expression serious. "Yes. It is not dangerous in the way you might think. It's not alive, and it won't attack you. But touching it, disturbing it, it can change things you might not be ready for." Henry frowned. He had lived long enough to know that warnings often had a kernel of truth, but he also knew that curiosity could not always be contained. "What kind of things?" "What? Keepy country. One?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Her gaze softened. "I cannot say. Some secrets are not meant to be spoken aloud. You will know them if you disobey." She paused, then added quietly, "I only warn you, because I do not want you to regret it." Henry nodded, though a small, stubborn part of him began to rebel. His life had been one of rules and routine, and yet here was something strange and mysterious that beckoned him. The lure of the unknown, of a secret hidden in plain sight, was almost irresistible. He glanced at the mound again, and a quiet question formed in his mind. What is really beneath it? As the afternoon wore on, the ranch grew warmer. Henry returned to his work, but his mind wandered constantly. He noticed small things he had never paid attention to before. The way the grass grew slightly differently around the mound, the subtle smell of earth that seemed stronger near it, and the faint lines in the soil that suggested something had been buried there long ago. Each detail made him more curious, more eager to uncover the truth. The woman remained nearby, often watching him with an unreadable expression. Henry began to feel a strange tension between them, as though she was both a protector and a challenge. He sensed that she had her reasons for warning him, but the secrecy only made him want to understand more. He imagined asking her directly, pleading for answers, but something in her eyes warned him that he would not like the truth if he pressed too hard. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Henry decided to take a short walk to the mound. He told himself it was just to examine it from a distance, nothing more. He walked slowly across the field, each step measured and careful, and stopped several feet away from the mound. From this distance, it seemed ordinary enough, a simple rise in the grass, nothing more. Yet, the more he looked, the more he noticed details he had missed before. Small cracks in the soil, faint depressions, and a texture that did not match the surrounding earth. The woman followed silently, her presence a quiet reminder of the warning she had given. "Remember what I said," she whispered. "Do not touch it." Henry nodded, though his curiosity was now a low-burning flame that refused to be extinguished. He circled the mound slowly, inspecting it from every angle. He imagined what could be buried beneath ancient tools, forgotten treasure, or perhaps something left by the original settlers of the land. Each thought made him more determined to understand, though he kept reminding himself to respect her caution. Night began to fall, painting the sky in deep blues and purples. The stars began to twinkle, and the air grew cooler. Henry returned to the cabin, feeling both restless and frustrated. The woman had prepared a simple dinner, and they ate in silence, the quiet only broken by the occasional crackle from the fireplace. After dinner, Henry found himself unable to sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the mound. The woman's warning echoed in his mind, but so did his growing desire to discover the truth. He remembered the subtle details he had noticed during the day, the faint cracks in the soil, and the unusual lines in the earth. What is really down there? The question would not leave him alone. In the following days, this pattern continued. Henry went about his chores, but his attention was always drawn back to the mound. The woman remained nearby, helping him when she could, but she rarely spoke of the mound, except to repeat her warning. Henry noticed that she would sometimes gaze at the sky, as though listening to something far away, and sometimes her expression would tighten with concern when he came too close to the mound. Despite himself, Henry began to feel a growing connection to the woman. There was a kindness in her presence, a patience that was almost comforting. But at the same time, her constant vigilance over the mound only made him more curious. He began to imagine what it would be like to uncover whatever secret lay beneath it. The idea became a quiet obsession, filling his thoughts during every spare moment. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Henry found himself standing near the mound again. He bent down to inspect it more closely, brushing away a few strands of grass. The soil was looser than he had expected, and he felt a strange thrill at the thought of what might lie beneath. The woman appeared behind him silently, her expression unreadable. "Henry," she said softly, "remember my warning. Some things are meant to be left alone." Henry straightened, feeling the weight of her words. He nodded, but inside, he felt the tension between respect and curiosity growing stronger. He knew that the next time he approached the mound, he would have to make a choice either to continue respecting the warning or to give in to the urge to uncover its secrets. As night fell again, Henry sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The woman had gone to her room for the night, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He realized that his curiosity was no longer just a quiet question, it had grown into a restless need to know. He knew that the mound was more than just a piece of earth. Something lay beneath it, something important, something that had captured the woman's fear and caution. Henry also realized that he could not ignore the feelings the woman's presence had awakened in him. He felt a strange mixture of admiration, respect, and curiosity about her motives. Who was she really? Why had she come all this way just to warn him? And what consequences would there be if he disobeyed her caution? As he lay awake that night, listening to the distant sounds of the cattle and the whispering wind, Henry understood that his life on the ranch was on the brink of change. The mound, the mysterious woman, and the secrets she guarded were all part of a story he had been drawn into. Whether he wanted it or not, he knew that the choice he would make in the coming days would shape not only his understanding of the land he had lived on for so long but perhaps the course of his life itself. The night was long, and sleep came reluctantly. Henry's mind was filled with images of the mound, the woman's warning, and the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the earth. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the decision he would soon face was more than just about curiosity. It was about trust, caution, and the unseen forces that sometimes dwell quietly in the world around us. And so, Henry waited, caught between respect and temptation, knowing that the days ahead would demand a choice that could not be undone. The days that followed were some of the longest Henry had ever experienced. Each morning, he awoke with the same restless feeling gnawing at him, the same thought looping endlessly in his mind. What is under that mound? The ranch felt different now, almost as if the land itself were holding its breath, waiting for him to make a choice. Even the cattle seemed quieter, their low murmurs blending with the whisper of the wind across the fields. Henry tried to keep himself busy. He repaired fences, tended the cattle, and even mended the old barn roof that had begun to sag. Yet, no matter how occupied he was, his eyes inevitably drifted to the far edge of the property where the mound lay. Each glance seemed to pull him closer, tempting him, daring him to defy the woman's warning. The warning itself had become almost a challenge, whispered over and over in his mind. Don't. Just don't touch it. The woman remained an enigma. She stayed mostly near the cabin, quietly helping with chores, preparing meals, and sometimes simply sitting and gazing at the horizon. Occasionally, she would glance toward the mound with a worried look, as if sensing Henry's growing fascination. But she never forced her presence upon him, never scolded him, only watched silently, her warning lingering in the air like a shadow. Henry had begun to imagine her life, the journey she had taken to reach his ranch, the people she might have met along the way. She was tall and graceful, her movements almost ethereal. Yet there was a strength in her presence that made him respect her deeply. But beneath the admiration, curiosity burned like a quiet flame. He wanted to know why she had come, why the mound was so dangerous, and what secrets the earth beneath it might hold. One late afternoon, when the sun was beginning to sink low in the sky, Henry found himself standing near the mound once again. He had spent the day tending the fields, yet he could not resist the pull of the mysterious rise of earth. He crouched beside it, brushing away a few strands of grass with his hand. The soil felt slightly warmer than the surrounding ground, and as he touched it, he noticed that it seemed softer, almost as if it had been recently disturbed. The woman appeared silently behind him, her expression unreadable. "Henry," she said softly, "remember my warning. Do not touch it." Henry straightened, meeting her eyes. There was concern there, a quiet urgency that made him hesitate. He nodded, as if agreeing to obey, yet the longer he looked at the mound, the more the temptation grew. The soil called to him, whispering promises of discovery, secrets, and knowledge. He imagined the possibilities. Relics from the past, something forgotten for generations, or a story that the land itself had hidden. For hours, Henry circled the mound, inspecting every angle. He noticed faint cracks in the earth, small depressions, and subtle changes in color that suggested the mound was more than it seemed. He traced his fingers along the top, feeling the strange texture beneath the grass. The urge to uncover it, to see what lay hidden, was almost unbearable. That evening, as the sky turned shades of deep purple and the first stars appeared, Henry found himself alone near the mound. The woman had gone to the cabin, leaving him in the quiet embrace of the twilight. He knelt, running his hands over the earth, feeling the contours and imagining the hidden shapes beneath. His heart beat faster, a mix of fear and excitement, and he realized that the moment he had been anticipating had arrived. Henry took a deep breath and slowly, carefully, pressed his hands into the soil. The earth gave way beneath his fingers, soft and yielding, unlike the hard, dry ground he was used to on the ranch. He felt something beneath a solid shape, different from the surrounding dirt. He paused, the warning echoing in his mind. Don't. Just don't touch it. But curiosity had become too strong, and he could not resist. With a determined effort, Henry began to dig, pulling away clumps of grass and soil. Each handful revealed more of the hidden shape, a structure that was both strange and fascinating. The mound was not simply a rise in the earth, it was covering something that had been buried long ago, something that time had forgotten. Henry's hands trembled as he uncovered it further, revealing faint metallic glimmers that caught the fading sunlight. As he worked, a sudden movement made him freeze. The woman appeared at the edge of the mound, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. "Henry!" she cried, rushing toward him. "Stop. Please stop." Henry looked up, torn. He wanted to obey her, but the object beneath the soil had drawn him too far. He could see the shapes now, strange, angular forms that reflected the twilight. There was a faint humming sound, almost imperceptible, as if the earth itself were reacting to his touch. The mound seemed alive in a way he could not understand, responding to his intrusion. The woman's voice was urgent, pleading. "Henry, you do not understand. You must leave it alone." For a moment, Henry hesitated, hands hovering over the uncovered shapes. The air around him felt charged, electric, as if the land itself were warning him. He could sense that he had crossed a boundary, one that should not have been crossed. Yet the sight of the hidden object held him in a trance. Then, as his fingers brushed one of the metallic shapes, a sudden rush of air burst from the mound, accompanied by a spray of soil and small stones. Henry stumbled back, shielding his face. The mound shifted, revealing a hidden spring of water beneath the surface. It gushed out with surprising force, soaking his clothes and drenching the earth around him. The metallic forms beneath the soil shimmered in the dim light, strange and beautiful, but also ominous. Henry's heart raced. He had not expected this, not in the slightest. The mound was more than a simple object buried in the earth. It was part of something larger. A hidden structure that had been dormant for years. He realized that the woman had not been exaggerating. The mound was dangerous, not because it could harm him directly, but because it contained forces and mysteries beyond his understanding. The woman rushed forward, her hands outstretched. "Henry, look at me," she cried. "Do you see now? This is why I warned you. Some things are not meant to be disturbed. You were lucky, very lucky that nothing worse happened." Henry looked at her, drenched and shocked, struggling to comprehend what he had just uncovered. The hidden spring flowed steadily, and the metallic shapes beneath the soil reflected the last rays of sunlight. He realized that his curiosity had almost led him into something far beyond his control. He had touched what should have been left alone, and the consequences, though not catastrophic, had shaken him to the core. As he stood there, catching his breath, the woman spoke again, her voice calm now but firm. "You must understand, Henry. The land remembers everything. It has its own rules, its own guardians. Sometimes, what seems harmless can awaken things that should remain asleep. You were drawn to it, yes, but you were lucky to escape unharmed." Henry nodded slowly, his mind still reeling. He had expected curiosity to bring him knowledge, perhaps even excitement. But what he had found was far more complex and humbling than he could have imagined. He realized that the woman's warning had not been a simple caution, it had been a lifeline, a way to prevent him from disturbing forces he was not ready to face. The night fell fully, casting a blanket of darkness over the ranch. The hidden spring gurgled softly, reflecting the starlight in its shimmering flow. Henry and the woman stood together near the mound, the air thick with unspoken understanding. Neither spoke for several moments, both processing the events that had just occurred. Finally, the woman said, "Henry, you must promise me something. Leave it alone from now on. Do not touch it again, and do not speak of it to anyone else. Some things are safer when they remain secret, even from those we trust." Henry swallowed hard, his respect for her growing even more. "I promise," he said quietly, still awed by what he had witnessed. "I won't touch it again. I understand now." The woman nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Good. Now, let's get you cleaned up. You've had quite the adventure, and the night is growing cold." As Henry trudged back toward the cabin, soaked and exhausted, he felt a mixture of relief, amazement, and humility. He had faced the unknown and survived, but he also knew that he had been foolish to ignore the warning. The mound, the hidden spring, and the metallic forms beneath it were now etched into his memory, a lesson in respect, curiosity, and the quiet power of the land he had always called home. That night, as he lay in bed, Henry thought about the events of the day. He realized that his curiosity, though natural and human, could have led to consequences far beyond his imagination. The woman's warning was no longer just words, it was a lesson, one he would carry with him for the rest of his life. And as he drifted into a deep, tired sleep, the mound remained untouched, the spring hidden once more beneath the earth, waiting silently for the next person who might be tempted by its mysteries. The morning after the events with the mound, Henry woke to a quiet, almost sacred stillness. The ranch felt different now, as if the land itself had shifted slightly in the night. settling into a calm that only came after something significant had happened. The wind whispered softly through the grass, and even the cattle seemed quieter, moving more slowly and deliberately. Henry lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day before. He had barely slept the night prior, his mind replaying the image of the hidden spring, the strange metallic shapes, and the sudden surge of water that had erupted when he had touched the mound. He could still feel the wet earth under his fingers and hear the faint hum that had seemed to vibrate from the ground itself. The memory of the woman's urgent voice warning him still echoed in his mind. "You were lucky, very lucky, that nothing worse happened." Henry slowly got out of bed and dressed. The woman had already begun her morning chores, quietly preparing breakfast and tending to the small garden near the cabin. She greeted him with a calm smile, and for a moment, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He knew he owed her more than words could express. Without her warning, he might have been seriously injured, or worse. "Good morning," she said softly. Henry shook his head, smiling faintly. "Not really. Too much on my mind." He paused, then added, "I keep thinking about the mound. About what I saw yesterday." She nodded knowingly. "It is natural to think about it. You were drawn to something very old, very powerful. Curiosity is a human trait, and it is not a weakness. But there are times when curiosity must be tempered with caution." Henry looked at her, realizing how much he had learned from her presence in just a few short days. Her warnings had been firm but gentle, and her guidance had prevented him from making a mistake he might never have recovered from. "I understand now," he said quietly. "I won't touch it again. I promise. I have assured, tenedade." She smiled faintly. "Good. That is all I ask." The rest of the day passed in a quiet rhythm. The two of them, working together, as Henry completed his usual chores. Yet, there was a new awareness in him now. A sense of respect for the land and the hidden mysteries it might hold. Every step he took near the mound, every glance he gave it, was filled with both caution and curiosity tempered by wisdom. He felt as though the earth itself was alive. Not in a frightening way, but in a way that demanded respect. Over the next few days, the woman shared more of her story, though carefully, leaving the mound itself untouched in her narrative. She told him of her travels, the weddings she had attended, the towns she had passed through, and the people she had met. She spoke of the joy and sorrow she had witnessed, of families reunited and friendships forged. Henry listened, fascinated by her stories, and he realized that her life, too, had been shaped by choices, caution, and curiosity, the same forces that had guided him in the events of the past days. Despite their growing familiarity, there remained a quiet mystery about her. Henry respected it, understanding that some things were not meant to be revealed. There was a depth to her presence, a sense of knowledge and experience that went beyond what she spoke aloud. He often wondered what had led her to this particular ranch at this particular time, and why the mound had been so important to her. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle above the plains, Henry found himself standing near the mound once again. He did not approach it closely this time. He simply stood at a respectful distance, looking at the contours of the earth. The hidden spring was gone, its water returned to the depths, and the metallic shapes remained buried beneath the soil, silent and still. The woman appeared beside him quietly, her presence as calm as the night air. "The land has a memory, and it knows who is wise enough to leave some things untouched. You have learned well, Henry. That, repses, that." Henry nodded, feeling a sense of humility he had not experienced before. He realized that his encounter with the mound had been more than just a moment of curiosity. It had been a lesson in patience, respect, and the consequences of actions. He understood now that some mysteries are best admired from a distance, and that true wisdom lies in knowing when to step back. In the days that followed, Henry returned to his routine, but his perspective had shifted. He no longer saw the ranch as simply land to work, but as a living, breathing entity that held secrets and stories waiting to be honored. He treated the earth with even greater care, noticing small details he had never seen before. The subtle changes in the soil, the movement of animals, the rhythm of the wind. Everything seemed connected, and he felt more attuned to the life around him. The woman continued to stay at the ranch for a while longer, helping when she could and sharing quiet moments of conversation. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and the simple joys of life. Henry found himself appreciating her presence, not only for the guidance she had given him, but also for the companionship she offered in a world that had often felt lonely. As the days turned into weeks, the mound remained untouched, a silent reminder of the day Henry had almost crossed a line he was not ready for. He sometimes thought about the metallic shapes and the spring hidden beneath the soil, but he never felt the urge to disturb them again. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had survived the encounter, learned the lesson, and honored the woman's warning. The woman eventually prepared to continue her journey, her wedding destination still ahead. The day she was to leave, Henry helped her pack her belongings, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She had been a teacher, a guide, and a companion, and her presence had changed him in ways he could not fully describe. Before she departed, she turned to him and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Remember, Henry," she said softly, "life is full of mysteries. Some are meant to be uncovered, and some are meant to be left untouched. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference." Henry nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I will remember," he said. "Thank you for everything." She smiled, then walked toward the gate. Henry watched as she disappeared down the dirt road, her white dress catching the sunlight one last time. When she was gone, the ranch felt quieter, emptier, but also more alive in a way that was impossible to describe. Henry knew that his life would never be the same. In the weeks and months that followed, Henry returned fully to his work on the ranch. He continued to care for the cattle, repair fences, and tend the fields. But he did so with a new awareness and a deeper respect for the land. He often found himself standing near the mound, looking at it silently, remembering the day he had almost crossed a line. He realized that the mound, the hidden spring, and the metallic shapes beneath the soil were symbols of the mysteries that life holds, and that his curiosity had been both a temptation and a teacher. Henry also thought about the woman, her presence, and her wisdom. He understood that she had come to his life not just to warn him, but to teach him the importance of respect, patience, and discernment. Her visit had been brief, yet its impact was lasting. He carried her words with him every day, reminding himself that some things are not meant to be disturbed, and that true understanding often comes from restraint. As the seasons changed, the ranch remained the same outwardly, yet Henry noticed subtle differences. The grass seemed greener, the cattle more content, and the wind carried a softer, gentler rhythm. He felt more connected to the land, more aware of the quiet forces that shaped it, and more appreciative of the simple joys that life on the ranch offered. Years later, long after the woman had left and continued her journey, Henry would sometimes tell stories of the strange mound and the warning he had received. But he never spoke of the spring or the metallic shapes. Those remained a secret between him, the land, and the woman who had taught him a lesson he would never forget. Henry came to understand that life is full of moments that test our patience, our curiosity, and our judgment. Some challenges are small, some are immense, but every encounter carries a lesson. The mound had been his test, and he had survived it, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He had learned to respect boundaries, to honor warnings, and to recognize the hidden power in things that seem ordinary. And so, the ranch continued to thrive, the mound remained untouched, and Henry lived his life with a newfound wisdom. He often stood under the wide Montana sky, looking at the horizon, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The land, the mysterious mound, and the woman's warning had changed him in ways he could never fully explain. He had learned that curiosity is powerful, but respect is stronger, and that the quiet lessons of life are often the most profound. Even in his quietest moments, when the wind whispered across the fields and the stars twinkled above, Henry remembered her words. Some things are meant to be uncovered, and some are meant to be left untouched. And he knew he would never forget.